Hi, and welcome to another episode of Kasper On BI. Today, we're going to talk to Shannon Lindsey. And Shannon is a good friend of mine who has a very interesting Power BI story to share. She didn't start out working with data or SQL or anything like that. She started out volunteering at Peace Corps. She worked in doctor's offices. But along the way, she started to become more interested in data. And today, we're going to share her story. How she started out from something unrelated to Power BI to where she is today working at Microsoft on Power BI related subjects. So this is going to be very interesting. And with that, let's go to the show. So hi Shannon, welcome to Kasper On BI. It's great to have you here. It's good to see you. I think last time I saw you, we were in DC. I think that's a really long time ago, maybe Atlanta probably, the Power BI conference.
Oh, yes.
So that's good. Great to have you here. And usually we spend not that long on introductions, but I think today, having you here and having an interesting story to tell, we spend a little bit more time on introductions because that's really the whole purpose and the gain of today's talk is really to more figure out, okay, how do you get from a different place, not really related to BI, data, and graphs, to where you are today, right? So welcome. Yeah.
Sure.
So maybe some background. That would be great.
Sure. Yeah. So, hi, Casper. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you. If you would have asked me 10 years ago where I would be and what I would be working with, I never ever would have guessed that this would be it. So, I'm really excited to be here and to kind of share my journey. So, my name is Shannon Lindsey, and I am working now full time with Power BI. But I actually started in undergraduate school. I was a pre-med and I wanted to go to medical school. And I couldn't quite decide what I wanted to be when I grew up. I thought I wanted to be a doctor, couldn't really decide. But I had always really wanted to serve others in a way that was meaningful to me. So I actually did something in the US that is pretty popular for privileged young Americans, and I joined something that's called the Peace Corps. And in the Peace Corps, I was stationed in a village in sub-Saharan Africa, in a country called Swaziland, which is now called Eswatini. And while I was living there, I was doing HIV/AIDS education. It was at the height of the AIDS epidemic, and I worked at a local clinic. Actually, one of the assignments that I had at the clinic was transforming all of their files from paper files into electronic medical records.
Oh, yeah.
So that was actually like my first foray into working with healthcare data. And then it really just escalated from there.
And escalated from there. Okay. Yeah. But I mean, and so what was next after the Peace Corps? So you spent a year there or longer?
Yeah, so I was there for a little over 2 years, living in a village with a family. I had no electricity, no running water. It was really like the experience of a lifetime. It was the most formative experience I've ever had. And I think it really made me who I am today as a person. It was incredible.
Yeah.
From there, I decided I was still doing the what do I want to be when I grow up kind of deal. So I moved back to the US. I actually lived with my parents. And I started working at a local nonprofit doing, again, kind of healthcare medical record keeping type work. And from there, I was like, okay, I don't think I want to be a physician, but I do want to get a degree in public health. So I went back to graduate school and I got a degree in public health. Within that public health degree, there was a concentration in what is called monitoring and evaluation, or monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And it's this whole subsector of development that's focused on using data.
Huh.
So, like, perfect, right up my alley. I got started in, making sure that we were actually first collecting the data that we needed to collect, and then, of course, that we could use it, and so on and so forth. And from there, I needed to obviously then get a job, but I wanted to go back to Africa. That was where my heart really was. It was thought I belonged, and it was where I thought that I could really contribute the most and make the most impact.
Hmm.
So I then joined Peace Corps a second time
Oh.
because I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. And to be honest, it was the only way that I could get someone else to foot the bill for me to fly across the world. And in that second role, it was more of like a professional posting. So it was only a year. And I worked with local government and I created a database for the district. And so it was a database that incorporated all of the different sectors. So education, health, police, all of that. And I was supposed to be focusing on HIV,
Hmm.
but generally speaking, there was no data system at all. And, every few years they had to produce this big, huge document, which was like a profile of the district and how everything functioned. So I gathered all the data and I built a database, and I have no idea if it's still being used. I would imagine it's not, but it was a great first experience into, of course, data collection in the field
Yeah.
and, data validation and
So
governance and all of that.
you say database. What?
Oh, there's a reason it's
I
in quotes.
I want to know more. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so the initial database it was all in Excel.
Hmm.
It was just essentially we just needed one central repository for everyone to dump things.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it was Excel based, and it ended up there was some data validation on it, but I mean, I knew nothing about data at that time really. I knew how to use Excel, but minimally, very minimally. But at that time I was one of the only people who had a laptop. I was one of the only people who grew up using a computer.
Uh,
So I felt like, it was a nice job for me to do because it was relatively easy. And something that I loved about it, which I still love today, was I got to work with all of the different stakeholders, bring them together, help them understand why collecting the data was important and what we were going to do with it. There were some sectors like the police, for example, that were really reluctant to give up their data. They kept great data um, on flip chart paper, like pasted to the walls.
oh yeah.
Uh, but they did not want to give it to us and of course, I can totally understand the reasons why. I mean, thoughts of like data privacy and what were we doing with the data, that wasn't really discussed at the time, but
Hmm.
I know better. I know more now.
Of course.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so that opportunity, that I was living in the country of Malawi, and then from there I wanted to stay. So I decided to stay, and I worked on a project. It was a U.S. government funded project, USAID, and I did again a monitoring and evaluation system for the project at large, and that was basically a nutrition and an agriculture project.
Mm.
So I kind of, my public health degree was specifically in the monitoring and evaluation of HIV programs. And I kind of started to deviate from that already with my first like big kid job in Malawi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So and
so
and
then,
and how were they using that data?
well, so in international aid and development, they use data really for two main purposes. One is for reporting back necessary requirements to the donor, know that their money is being used appropriately. And then the second is for program improvement. So, of course, we always would try to do more of the program improvement, but I think especially what I see today is that the donors are requiring more and more data on a very routine basis. And so it's often scrambling to get the systems in place to collect the data. And then, of course, reporting takes everyone's bandwidth and there's less time to actually do the analysis. But at that time, still, we did not use any sort of data visualization tools. There was no data warehouse. There were no BI tools or processes being implemented whatsoever. This was
Yeah.
still like I was the expert, and really I knew very little.
Well, this is
And
probably not unique to just this. I think it happens all over the world still today.
yeah, it's. It, I think that especially in, I feel like international development and aid, we're a couple years or 5 to 10 years behind everyone else as far as technology and, up to date processes. And so that was a great, like, really diving deep into the mountain of data that we were collecting and seeing how it was and was not being used, and having the chief of party, so the top like executive at that organization, in my ear saying, I need the data to say this.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And me saying, I'm not really comfortable with, doing that. So it was super interesting. I'm so glad that I had a chance to learn that. And yeah, then after working in that job for about a year and a half, I decided I was ready to come back to the US. And then I got the dreamiest of dream jobs working at an organization called the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation.
Yeah.
And that was a job working and living in Washington, where I still am today. And that was where I began my journey of PowerQuery, which led me to Power BI, which led me into where I am today. So while I was working with Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation, or EGPAF for short, I had the opportunity to work with a real visionary, and that is our friend, Stephanie Bruno.
Yeah.
And working with Stephanie, she is my friend and mentor. I feel like I owe everything I know about BI to her. She really kind of helped me get my feet wet and helped me understand what was and was not important and where to focus my energy. And it was really interesting because we were on sort of adjacent teams. We were not on the same team, but my team was tasked with using data and her team was tasked with collecting, managing, organizing the data. And her team was a really small team, and I ended up needing much more of their time than they could give me. And so then I was like, well, I guess I'll just learn this and do it myself. And Stephanie pointed me to the right courses to take and the right, people to pick their brains and the right, organizations to become active in. And that was really how I got my start in where I am today.
Yeah. So what really, because that's also the moment that you started using Power BI, I assume, right?
Yes.
So what
started with PowerQuery, and then a couple years later went into Power BI.
So PowerQuery, because you were doing the data manipulation in Excel. So it's PowerQuery in Excel.
Yeah. So when I first started at this organization here in DC, I was like really questioning my choices, because most of what I was doing was collating data from, the thousands of different health facilities that we worked at all over the world. And I was copying and pasting or index matching or, doing whatever it was I needed to do to get all of the data into one place. I don't even like VLOOKUPs at all. Wasn't using them. But yeah, it was just, I was like joking that my copy paste fingers were really strong. I was like, like all I'm doing is copying and pasting. Did I get a master's degree to do this? I was really questioning my choices at that point. The organization was so amazing to work for, and I support them fully. I love everything that they do, but I really did not have a breakthrough in my work and a breakthrough in my impact to the organization until I learned how to combine files from a folder using PowerQuery. That was like the real light bulb moment for me.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So that's really from an Excel user standpoint, going to understanding consolidation of data and things like this. And then the next step, so that's really consolidating and getting everything into Excel. So what was the moment that you started thinking about visualizations too?
Yes. So I have Stephanie I don't want to say to blame, because it's not blame at all. I have Stephanie to thank for the data viz piece of it as well. I think 5 or so years ago, 6 years ago, everyone in our organization was saying, this is all about data use. We want to be using the data to make decisions. We are data driven. We are evidence based, but there really wasn't a lot behind it. It was a lot of talk without a lot of action. And Stephanie came to us, actually, I'm not sure what the first iteration of it was, but when I got involved, she came to us with DataZen.
Yeah.
For data viz, and that's just the overall global metrics of how many individuals is the organization reaching, because we did not even know simple statistics like that. There was a debate, and this debate still goes on, I would say, about how many health facilities we supported. And the whole goal, what the organization does, well, part of what they do is support to health facilities. But I think every organization has this issue. There were naming issues, and there were no unique IDs, and the people who were working in the field knew what the facilities were, but we did not, and all of that. So Stephanie helped us bring things together, both on the back end and then also on the front end with the data viz. And once people get their eyes on it, it's like, of course they love it because data viz is sparkly and shiny and all that.
Yeah.
But I think in that organization, the best takeaway or the best result of the data viz was that people actually started looking at the data quality issues. And once they got their eyes on the data, they were like, this is not right. And there's a huge communication gap when you're working globally. It was really the people in the field who were saying, those facilities are not correct. These are the facilities we actually support. And then we finally had some kind of a feedback loop where we could actually have accurate data for people to use.
So maybe that's also interesting because we didn't talk about it. But so Elizabeth Glacier, I was lucky enough to go there too and kind of see it a little bit. But they have facilities all over Africa, right? Or maybe all over the world. And they're all using it?
Well, yes and no. So the health facilities are managed by the ministries of health in the countries. And then Elizabeth Glaser goes in and they provide support. So whether that is support to the healthcare providers for making sure that they have the right, best, most up-to-date information and practices, or whether it's providing materials, something like rapid HIV tests, or facilitating the supply chain for antiretroviral drugs, something like that. And in each country, the basis of information is the Ministry of Health Management Information System. And so it's different in every country. There are really no standards. There are overarching standards that WHO recommends, but it's very different from country to country. So something that we were able to do with, under Stephanie's guidance and with the help of Power BI was to encourage people to properly manage their data and get data in one place. Stephanie was able to implement a data warehouse for the whole organization, which is a whole other project and a whole other podcast. But what we were able to do was to get eyes on the data, both at HQs, so at the headquarters and in the countries. And in the countries, they all have their own monitoring and evaluation teams, and they are supposed to be analyzing the data. And again, there's like this push and pull because the donors want the data, but then of course, the researchers, the physicians, the decision makers want the data as well. Yeah. So there are two main purposes that the data viz ended up fulfilling, and not entirely, of course, but that was the goal.
And so maybe, this is interesting, and we'll definitely come back to it because this is really about data literacy too, right? Like actually educating. This is what's happening, and this is what needs to happen in every organization, not just in this case, but also like in a factory or anything else, like where people are used to working in Excel and notebooks and looking at data, but how can they get more? But I wanted to go back to the first thing we were talking about is like, okay, because I've seen this before, but now I have you here so I can ask you these questions, is actually making that mind shift from way of working in Excel to Power BI way of working or PowerQuery and things like this. So because it's hard, it's not that simple. So can you share anything about that or and
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. It's beyond hard. It's incredibly difficult. So not only are we trying to, work on data literacy and get people to use the data, but at the same time, we had to kind of create a community of developers or report builders or whoever it is that you want to call them and train them on what is a dimensional data model? Why do you need it? What is the difference? And actually, I would say that this is one of the biggest challenges we had was the mind shift from a big flat Excel file to a dimensional model. That was it. And so the way that we accomplished that was actually really neat. I think this happened right after one of the data insights summits, maybe after one of the big conferences. Myself, Stephanie, and another colleague of ours, Aliza Lailari, we all got to go to the conference together, which is like huge for a nonprofit. 3 people getting to go to one conference was amazing. But it was at that conference that we started, brainstorming and thinking more of how can we really make this work? Because we had what we needed at headquarters. We had the buy-in of the executives. So that was great. Like, yes, we know we need this, but we did not have that network on the ground of people to use and build the technology. Our team of 5 back in the US could not support all of the countries that we worked in. So at that conference, the 3 of us decided that we were going to start an internal Power BI user group. And Stephanie was already running the Pittsburgh Power BI user group. I was working with the DC Power BI user group. So we had a flavor of what it was that we wanted to be. But it was Aliza who came in and really said, like, this is what we need to do. This is how we're going to do it. And so the user group is still active to this day. And what we really tried to do was to make it led by the field teams. And it's taken on its own whole persona. So it's a really active user group. Everything's run through Teams. They have quarterly meetings. So it's not like the stress of meeting every single month, but they still meet regularly. And in those quarterly meetings, the country teams demo things that they have done and, write blog posts about what they have done. One of the biggest challenges related to data modeling for the data that we were working with is oftentimes the sample data sets, like sales data, for example, and I mean, this, you did the training, Kasper, it's really difficult to translate that type of data into healthcare data because we're looking at, data on patients and what their symptoms are and, patient level type information as opposed to transaction information. And once you're more experienced, you can see the connections and you can see how that translates. But if we were to say hey, go Google, how to build a star schema, it doesn't necessarily make sense with the type of data that we were working with. So I think that the internal user group was really the catalyst for having a team of developers in every single country that was able to do the work. And I will say that the team of developers in each country was really catalyzed by the training that you and Patrick and Maggie did.
Yeah. I mean, that was amazing to see. I was thinking about it. I mean, I still think about it a lot. Like the stories that these people tell us about too. Like, okay, the way that they collect the data, like they go on their motorcycles and they go to like a very local facility somewhere deep in the Sahara, and they go look at things and write them down and take over from some big ledgers that are there and take them back and put them in the system. And that's just a whole different ballgame than IoT devices and all of these things. It definitely not there yet. So yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I think if you can do it there, and then it should be possible for every organization, I would think, to be able to get it done.
I mean, I can't say that, the work definitely is not done, right? Like at the end of the day, all of the data collection is still done on paper. Nothing has changed in that regard. And it will not change for the foreseeable future. I mean, just, logistically speaking and where the donors are wanting to put their money, it's not going to change. There are so many different pilots with so many of these different healthcare nonprofits where they do mobile data collection and they build apps. And we've deployed a bunch of Power Apps. And there are all sorts of different things that we can try to do. But at the end of the day, what we're really doing is actually duplicating the Ministry of Health's system, which defeats the whole entire
Yeah.
purpose. So, in the grand scheme of things, Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation is there to strengthen the national health system, not to build a parallel system. So it's really an interesting tightrope of trying to figure out, you know, I always go back to the question of like, are we doing more harm than we're doing good? Are we really like contributing to the situation in the country? And, now with all of the social justice issues that have come to light, I have been thinking a lot about my own journey and about like, is this some, Western white saviorism at play here where we're trying to come in and solve everybody's problems? And I know that is like a very deep topic that would, it's going to take me years of therapy to drill down into, but
Yeah.
it's something to think about because, all of the paper, all of the data systems still start with paper in the countries that those types of organizations work with. And so you just have to find a solution that takes that into consideration.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, regardless of maybe you're not helping or doing I think, I mean, having it seen up close, and these people, like, their eyes were just being opened by the fact that the things that are possible. And maybe not in all the times it actually is something that would actually help in their work, but you also enrich their lives by teaching them things that they would not otherwise have never have access to. When they can actually,
Yeah.
I kept in touch with some on Twitter and things like this. I noticed some of them also moved to other jobs, and because that probably
Hmm.
because the experience that you've taught them, and the BI knowledge and things like this. So I definitely think that this is one of the things that I've written down in my notes too. Like, yeah, we're all sitting here, and we were just talking about our offices and how we sit here in a nice, cozy office with the fast internet connections. But that's definitely not the case in Africa. And even in the place that I went to teach class, it was good, but that's a very nice hotel where they would come to,
Right.
and their offices are probably not like that. So, how does that play into the equation?
Well, I'm really glad you bring this up actually, because working in that industry, and I've been removed for a couple years now, so I have, hindsight is 2020 and I have the benefit of distance from it, but it's really easy to get discouraged and to get jaded and to think, you know, oh my gosh, this is so hard and there are so many challenges and it is really hard to overcome and I don't know how we're ever going to overcome it. But thinking of the personal connections that we were able to make, and I would say throughout my time working in that industry, starting from when I was in the Peace Corps up until my last day working with Elizabeth Glaser, the personal connections really were valuable to me. And those are connections that I maintain to this day. And when I was in the Peace Corps, I didn't go into it with super grandiose ideas, although I was very young and I was very naive. So I'm not trying to claim that I knew what I was doing. But my MO was, if while I'm here in this 2 years, I can encourage one person to make a different decision about their sexual health that will prevent them from getting HIV, then my job is done.
Yeah.
If I can influence one person's life, my job is done. And that I feel like I accomplish only through my personal connections and my friendships. Do I think that entering data in the back room of a clinic accomplished that? No, definitely not. But what I've loved about this work, and that I still love about this work to this day, is that element of personal connection and empathy and personal growth. I feel like I have benefited, or I have had so much personal growth myself, and it happened really fast. And I think it's because I was exposed to the right people, I was in the right place at the right time. And I owe so much to my friends in the community, yourself, Stephanie, all of my friends that have helped me through this. And if I did not help other people along that same journey, that would be pointless.
Mm.
So I have loved staying in touch with people and seeing them grow and seeing them still start, power platform consulting companies in, the first in the country that they live in. So at the end of the day, if I get discouraged about, the data flow or the processes at the health facility, which we have very little control over, I do have a good feeling about the fact that the skills that we helped people gain are going to serve them for the rest of their careers. I feel good about that.
Yeah. And I think, it's not just that, but also the insights of the data that they never had before. Like, even though it's not,
Absolutely.
It's not a nice, amazing Kimball star schema with amazing everything there, but they have gotten insights that they've never had before. There's less data quality issues. And I think that's important. And I think that's probably the most important thing also about actually getting people to do things like the data literacy and getting these things happening is by showing them, as you have done, by showing them what is possible and how they can visualize things and get the ball rolling. Yeah, of course it's different. It's a different mindset than in the Western world. It's a different, they have different problems. Like our problems are, oh, it's raining so hard, and there they have many different, more serious problems. So it's easy to say from our nice offices, but that's a different.
And
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say something that I'm trying to learn how to translate into my current work is working there. It was really easy to help people understand, like, this is the value add of learning the software, right? Like, you will no longer spend 20 hours a week combining files. You will, with 4 clicks of a button, you will be able to combine files, and then you can actually do analysis. So it was a really easy sell.
Yeah, and you can refresh.
Like, this is going to save you. Yes, this is going to save you so much time. All the data is at your fingertips. Every single month, you don't have to do the same thing over and over again. It was such an easy sell. And I am now trying to translate that into the broader picture of people working in business and, just people working in all industries. How and why do you need to know this, really? And oftentimes, it sounds nice to say, we are actually potentially saving lives with this data. It's much different to say we are actually making someone at the top richer with this data. It's very different. So I'm trying to sort of learn the mind shift, but most importantly, I want to learn how to connect with people that are in those other industries because, I am no longer in that nonprofit space.
Yeah. And so maybe going back to something you said earlier too, about like trainings and stuff so what are some of the things? So let's say I'm an Excel user today. What would you tell them? How can you get to this next level where you can get rid of the mundane tasks of copying and pasting and putting things into one file and then pivoting it? And what are some things you would tell them?
Oh, there are so many. I think, the first thing that I like to start with is more conceptual. So what are the questions you're trying to answer with that data? And then how are you going to get to the end? Because where I would really like to start is, this is how you can, automate your processes, ingest Excel files, yada, yada, yada. But there are some things about, data governance and structure and things that people need to understand before they can actually make that work for themselves. So if you start by saying, here's a folder full of CSV files, go do this exercise where you can combine them all. Okay, yeah, yes, that's useful, but have you talked about how every single file has to be in the same format? And have you talked about how to build in data validation in Excel if you have to use Excel as a data collection tool, which of course I don't recommend, but it has to be done in some cases. So you just have to figure out.
And it's also hard to change.
How to lock things up.
If you've done it for 10 years, okay, now what? Do I have to use Power Apps or build something in Power Apps to do it, and then use that as a change is hard because
Yeah, and
someone,
we tried that,
yeah,
and it didn't. I mean, it's too hard.
I think one of the design tenets that we used to use when I just joined Microsoft as a Power BI is change is bad unless it's great, and that's really, it needs to be really like really making your eyes open so that you can actually go ahead and make those changes. So yeah, so it's more fundamental. So but and what about like actual trainings or books or things that you would say people should go ahead and do, especially from the Excel
Yeah,
standpoint?
so from the Excel standpoint, the first training I would always do hands down, and then I would do it again, would be Rob Colley's Power Pivot Pro training. That is the first training that I did, and it was after I had been working in Power BI or PowerQuery for probably a year, over a year maybe, and the training was still way over my head, way over my head. I've got the book, I've got the little quick start guide. I still reference it all the time. So I would start with that training. But now things are different now, even than they were 5, 6 years ago, where there is so much free training available online. And there are so many resources. There are so many great podcasts and blogs and things that people can reference. So I think the real difficulty there is like sifting through the noise.
Hmm.
But for me, the fundamentals were really important. I kind of understood the process. I understood what things needed to be, but I did not understand how DAX worked. So the
I still
two
don't
free
understand. So
SQL BI trainings. Oh my gosh. Yeah, like the two free trainings, the introducing DAX and their intro to data modeling course. Those are gold. And I know that what else would I recommend? I think those three were the ones that started helping me explore what I don't know. I mean, there's so much you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know.
yeah, yeah.
So those were the three that really helped me get my feet wet. And those are the only formal trainings that I have ever done. I think the other thing for me that was critical, and I feel like this goes with learning anything new, is you have to be curious and you have to be willing to put in the time. I mean, the number of hours that I spent outside of working hours to learn the technology, and that I still spend to this day to help other people learn the
Yeah.
technology, because that in turn helps me. It's the hours
And that kind of brings us
that are really
to
beneficial.
maybe a side. So user groups, conferences. So I know you've been very active there. So can you maybe share a bit about that too? Like what does it help you and what does it do? And
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So conferences were a completely new thing to me coming into the data world. In public health, all of the conferences are academic and it's all about presenting your research, and very few people get to go to the conferences. And when you're there, it's not really about collaborating with other authors. It's about, this is my proprietary information
mm,
and I'm sharing it to you as a service.
yeah,
Whereas the first conference I went to with Stephanie, um, it was probably a data insight summit or something like that. My mind was blown, because you go into these sessions where people are freely sharing what they know, and they want to share so that you can learn and so that you can more easily implement the technology. I was like, what? Like, this world exists where people want to help each other. And I think it was at that same time where, you know, Stephanie and I were not based in the same place. So we didn't ever really have the chance to like put our heads together and think through problems. So we would sit down and put our heads together and start to think through problems. And then Casper would walk by and Stephanie would pull you in and say, hey, look, this is a challenge we're dealing with. What do you think about
yeah,
this? And so those kinds of interactions at conferences are just invaluable. They're such gold. And I so miss in-person conferences. I
oh
still
yeah,
love the virtual conferences, and I still get a lot out of them. But to me, the connecting with people and learning from other people's perspectives and other people's experiences, that will never be
Oh
replaced
yeah, I'm totally
online.
with you. I would love, like, even during the day you talk to people, and evening you go for a beer and you talk about things, and yeah, you learn a lot. So by yeah,
And
soon hopefully.
I think those few, my first 3 years working with Power BI, I was really like, oh my gosh, have I like found a community that I actually feel like I belong in and that people value what I have to say and then they want to help me?
Mm.
I was like, this is like, because where I was coming from, I had a master's degree, but I did not have a PhD. So no one really was that interested in what I had to say. No one wanted to learn from me because they all had their own ways of doing things. And, it's just a different environment. So I'm not slamming that at all. But my mind was blown when I was introduced to the data community. The amount of camaraderie and support. And I also think the willingness to spend lots and lots of time helping other people for a cause that you believe in. I mean, there are just so many things about conferences that I cannot enough. So I would say, if people have an opportunity to go to conferences, even if they're paid and they're expensive, it is so, so worth it.
Yeah.
You do have to be willing to put yourself out there, which can be really scary for a lot of people. And I think that can be a roadblock. But I was lucky enough to have Stephanie was my shepherd. And she kind of, introduced me to people and helped me on my way. And I feel like now I have the opportunity to do that and to pass that on. And I hope that that kind of thing continues.
Yeah, but I think that also kind of brings us to the user groups, right? Because that's like a little bit like conferences. You have to get on a plane and you have to fly and you have to stay there, and it's a bit more daunting probably. But the user group, maybe you can talk about that too.
Yes, absolutely. So, um, I currently work with the DC Power BI user group, and we've been in existence for over 3 years now, maybe 4 years, and we have quite an active user group community. But I did not know that user groups were a thing because remember, I don't have a technology background at all. So I didn't know what a user group was. I didn't even know about Meetup. I knew nothing. But it was at one of the conferences where there was a meeting of user group leaders, and Stephanie was a user group leader, and she said, hey, I think you should come to this because I think that this would be something you'd be interested in. And at that point, I was already hooked on the community because I just, it was so valuable to me already. And then I learned, oh, this is how I can bring that community home so that every day, if I have a challenge I need to work through, or if I want to talk to somebody about something, or, whatever,
Yeah.
I then have that like inbuilt community where I live. And so here, Washington, D.C. is a weird place to live. I love living here, but it's weird because you've got like these factions of people. So you have the federal government workers, you have the nonprofit workers, and then you have these like consultants who help the nonprofits. Those are really like the three main industries here that I see. And so as a nonprofit person, I was like, well, wouldn't it be nice if we could bring all of these industries together to
Hmm.
help each other and remove that element of everyone competing for one very small pot of resources and money? And it's been really cool to see how different people are willing to come together and help people. And, we've got people that go get coffee and help someone build their first report, or, it's, we have created over the years a really, really nice local community where people feel safe enough to be able to ask their
Yeah,
questions
exactly.
and, get help immediately when they need it. I mean, like if somebody from the user group sends me an email, I can email them back right away and say, "Hey, I don't really actually know that much about this, but here's a person who does." And you guys can meet up. And then they get their question answered that day, and
Yeah.
everybody wins.
Yeah, and then I think the good thing is they are everywhere. Like every metropolitan area in the world probably has a user group. Like I even know like
Yes.
the guys that I did a training for in Kenya, they also started the user group. So it's
Yes.
there. So yeah, probably everywhere in the world. So if you want to go and meet other people who want to learn from Power BI, you can go to a user group and talk, and maybe at one point you think, and I think this is the other interesting thing is too, is I had the same thing in the beginning when I just got started. Like someone pushed me. It's like, you should go share what you're doing. It's pretty cool. And we had the same conversation in the beginning. Like, yeah, do I need to share anything? It's not that exciting that I'm doing, but what you do matters, and people learn from it. And everyone has their unique points of view, and yeah, you can share, and people can learn, and anyone can learn.
Yeah. And I love that about the user group. Like, actually, at our last meeting, we had someone present. Jimmy Gibson presented on how he used his Ancestry.com data to build a family tree for his family. So they were all using it, and he shared how he built the data model and everything about it. But it was such a unique use case and just so interesting. And every single person was like, wow, I never thought of that. That's so cool. My family would love that. So it's just such an opportunity to learn and share if you want to. It's low stakes. So if you're nervous about sharing, we do like 5-minute demos.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to start sharing, come do a 5-minute demo, see if you like it, see how it goes for you. It's really, really fun. And the other thing I do want to mention about user groups is when I first started here in DC, there was no Power BI user group. And so I would encourage people, if there is no user group in your location, you can start one. And, if you want to talk anything through or have questions about how to do that, people can reach out to me. I'm happy to share everything I've learned.
Yeah, that sounds good. Maybe that's another interesting topic. Yeah, so and I also love the user groups and going there. DC is a bit far for me, but I would love to come and go and listen in. So maybe we'll go to the almost last question. So now you've started working at Microsoft. So what are you doing there? You was talking about taking some of those things over and into your role at Microsoft. Can you share a bit more about that one?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm very, very new at Microsoft, for the record, brand new.
Welcome aboard.
Still learning. Thank you. I'm still learning what is up and what is down. But I feel like I'm in a really great place that's a good fit for my skill set. So I am on the worldwide learning team, working on the DA100 data analyst certification. And so that includes, of course, the certification exam, but also the training that we provide so that people can learn the content to pass the exam. And I am really super passionate about training and, instructional design and adult learning. And so this seems like it's going to be a great fit for me. The one thing I am struggling with that, all recommendations are welcome, is my experience in the past. I have done some consulting in addition to my nonprofit work, but most of my experience has been in the same realm. It's mostly nonprofit or academia. It's mostly healthcare data.
Vertical.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so I am looking to, of course, expand my knowledge base, but at the same time, I think it's so important for the learning material to be relevant to people, which is difficult to do when you're trying to serve the masses. So I think I've got a lot to learn about how to tailor my instructional design and how to make sure that the really key important features of the product that people need to use on a daily basis to be effective, I want to make sure that all of that is represented in what I do.
Yeah, that sounds great. And one other thing is I've seen on Twitter, and I'll put your Twitter handle in the description too, but the Work Over Wednesdays.
Yes. So I have been really fortunate to be brought on board to a team of people who are working on an initiative that is called Workout Wednesdays. So it's just workout-wednesday.com. And Workout Wednesday is an initiative that was started by the Tableau community. And, the Tableau community has been around for a bit longer. They have a really vibrant community and they do great data viz. I mean, they do. So we are piggybacking on their initiative, and Spencer Bauke started the Power BI edition of Workout Wednesday. He then recruited Megan Longoria, David Eldersveld, and myself. We are now helping. And what it is it's a series of weekly challenges where we provide a data set, we provide even a data model, and we ask people to come in and create visualizations. So it's focusing on, I don't want to say it's like the forgotten piece of Power BI, but it's certainly a
Oh
piece
yeah.
that there hasn't been as much emphasis on in the community, and that is the actual visualization piece. I think as a developer, and I hope, or I suspect that a lot of other people would say the same thing. I personally know that when I'm building reports, I spend 90 to 95% of my time on the back end and, creating the metrics that need to be created. And then in the last, 5%, I slap some visuals on the page, which of course is not a best practice. I'm not endorsing that at all. But I do think that Workout Wednesday is a great opportunity for us to practice and flex our data visualization skills. And what I'm loving about it so far is that all of the participants are putting their own stamp on the visualizations and putting their creativity and their artistry into the viz, um, which has been really fun to see. So I'm excited to see where that goes. If people want to participate, it's easy, it's low stakes. You can just download the data set, work on your report. If you want to share and publish it, you can. Pressure to do so. And I do think eventually at some point in time, we may do some kinds of participation awards or something, but we're not there quite yet.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I was seeing it. I was thinking about doing one too, but maybe this week. I don't know. Yeah.
This week's is, I would say, from my perspective, I know everything's subjective, but this week's is an easy one, because we're focusing on using drill down in Power BI. But what we're trying to do with the initiative is to start basic, so that people aren't intimidated as they come in, and then we will build on that from there. But what's been really cool is seeing the amount of crossover between the two communities, between Tableau and Power BI, and watching people say, this is really interesting, I didn't know you could do that this way. And something that, like, you and I would think, okay, yeah, like drill down, that's like it's simple and it's something that we've always known how to do, but just teaching people how to use it has been really cool. And seeing like their aha moments via Twitter, of course, has been really neat.
Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, I've been watching it, so definitely good. So maybe the last one. So yeah, as I said in the beginning, you've been really all over the place, but work experience from Peace Corps in Africa to healthcare, and now at Microsoft and Power BI. What advice would you give people who are interested in data and want to get started?
The main piece of advice I would give to people is to find, well, it depends on who the person is and what their personality type is. If you are more extroverted, I would say to find a local community and get involved with your community. Don't be ashamed to ask people for help. I initially was always really embarrassed to ask people for help because I thought like, oh, I should know this, but once you form relationships with your local community, all of that goes away and you're able to ask people questions and, start to get pointed in the right direction of the right kinds of resources. So I would say get involved in your local community. Don't be afraid to admit that you don't know. Still every day there are so many things that I do not know, and I'm constantly asking people for help. And sometimes I am still a little ashamed, I'll admit, but I'm working on that. So get involved in your local community. Another thing I would say is learning how to ask your question is also half the battle. So understanding what is it that you're really trying to ask. Are you able to? Someone did a post about this recently. I think it Marco Russo. He posted about forming the right question.
Well, I think it was one of the Daniela who's working with, but he tweeted about it for sure. I saw it too.
Okay, yeah. So, and that takes practice and it takes work. So understanding how to ask the right question, how to know what kind of support you need. So yeah, just learning and being willing to be open and learn and fail publicly. That one's really hard. But um, I would also say that if you do not work, I have a lot of people who come to me who say, I want to get involved with data and I want to be an analyst, but I don't work with data in my daily job. So where do I start? And, I would say familiarize yourself with the open data sets that exist online. Microsoft has their own open data sets. There are so many different
Yeah.
sources that are available. And then I think one of the best ways to do that is to get involved in the community initiatives. And whether you like locally participate is up to you, but there's the Prep and Data Initiative, which would help you with your back end data modeling, data prep. There's Workout Wednesday. There are a couple of other entities that have their own exercises on their own websites. So you just got to work in the product. Reading books is not going to help you for this one. I mean, it will help you once you're hands on and you know what questions to ask and what to look for in the book,
Yeah.
but you just got to do it.
Then you can start reading Marco's book. All right.
I'm that control F in that book
Yeah.
for me.
All right. So that's I think that's really good advice, and I think we're at the end. So thank you very much. I think as another interesting episode, I learned a lot. I think people who want to get started with Power BI would also learn a lot about it. So I think that's really good. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Kasper. I feel honored to even be considered to be on your podcast.
No, that's what I'm saying. Everyone has interesting stories to tell and things to learn. And there are more people that work in Excel and they work a little bit with data out there than all of us data people combined today. So there's a large opportunity for people to become more data literate and also to take their organization to the next level by working with the data and giving them insights. And you definitely have done that journey. So it's very interesting for a lot of people to learn.
It's been a really fun journey.
All right. Thank you. And I'll talk to you next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks, Kasper.
And that brings us to another end of this Kasper On BI episode. If you liked it, please subscribe to my channel. We're also available on all your favorite podcasts channels, so you can listen to it there. And thank you for your time, and I hope you've learned a lot.